senior squirrels. Mr. Bookman is joined by Mary Florine, JoJo. There's Mr. Bookman. JoJo has to sit over here until I get more shelves. She looks lovely on top of my jewelry armoire right there. But then you can't see her. I need more shelves, but I don't know where I'd put them. Because it's kind of hard to see. Oh, there's little Sawyer. There's Miss Kitty kind of falling over Sawyer, but that kind of keeps him up there. Festus. Oh, what did we name this one? Chester. From Miss Diana and Nutty Buddy. And from Miss Yarny Cat Beth. Mary Florine came from Thais, I think, and Rocky from Miss Karen, and back there is Clovis from Madonna. Liliana got Nutty Buddy way back when. I just feel like I always need to tell y'all about who got what. Madonna got the squirrel sign. Y'all get me way yonder too much. Like Denisha says, there is such thing as too much yarn. And Crystal says there's not, but I am out of room, y'all. I love to get it. What I need more hands. Well, I need to just get my iron up so I can stay awake more. Every time I sit to do some stitching, I go, can't. Which is why I'm up all night. It's a vicious cycle. Boy, this chapter 12 is crazy. I don't think I hardly even got started last time, but let's go with it. Let's see. Let me have a go at the stake. S-T-A-K-E. I believe they were making gardens. I believe they were. We don't cheat in America, but you can if you choose, said Joe angrily. Yankees are a deal, the most tricky everybody knows. There you go, returned Fred. Oh, playing croquet, sorry. Croqueting her ball far away. Jo opened her lips to say something rude, but checked herself in time, colored up to her forehead, and stood a minute, hammering down a wicket with all her might while Fred hit the stake and declared himself out with much exultation. She went off to get her ball and was a long time finding it among the bushes, but she came back looking cool and quiet and waited her turn patiently. It took several strokes to regain the place she had lost, and when she got there, the other side had nearly won, for Kate's ball was the last but one and lay near the stake. By George, it's all up to us. Goodbye, Kate. Miss Jo owes me one, so you are finished, cried Fred excitedly as they all drew near to see the finish. Yankees have a trick of being generous to their enemies, said Jo with a look that made the lad redden. Especially when they beat them, she added, as leaving Kate's ball untouched, she won the game by a clever stroke. Laurie threw up his hat, then remembering that it wouldn't do to exult over the defeat of his guest, and stopped in the middle of a cheer to whisper to his friend. Good for you, Jo. He did cheat. I saw him. We can't tell him so, but he won't do it again. Take my word for it. And that was a whisper. Meg drew her aside under pretense of pinning up a loose braid and said approvingly, it was dreadfully provoking, but you kept your temper. I'm so glad, Jo. Don't praise me, Meg, for I could box his ears this minute. I should certainly have boiled over if I hadn't stayed among the nettles till I got my rage. And so when she went to find the ball, got my rage under enough to hold my tongue. It's simmering now, so I hope he'll keep out of my way, returned Jo, biting her lips as she was as she glowered at Fred from under her big hat. "Time for lunch," said Mr. Brooke, looking at his watch. "Commissionary General, will you make the fire and get water while Miss March, Miss Sally, and I spread the table? Who can make good coffee?" "Joe can," said Meg, glad to recommend her sister. So Joe, feeling that her late lessons in cookery were to do her honor, went to preside over the coffee pot, while the children collected dry sticks and the boys made a fire and got water from a spring nearby. Miss Kate sketched, and Frank talked to Beth, who was making little mats of braided rushes to serve as plates. The commander-in-chief and his aide soon spread the tablecloth with an inviting array of edibles and drinkables, prettily decorated with green leaves. Joe announced that the coffee was ready, and everyone settled themselves to a hearty meal, for youth is seldom dyspeptic, and exercise develops wholesome appetites. A very merry lunch it was, for everything seemed fresh and funny, and frequent peals of laughter startled a venerable horse who fed nearby. There was a pleasing inequality in the table which produced many mishaps to cups and plates. Acorns dropped into the milk. Little black ants partook of the refreshments. Of course, you can't have a picnic without ants, right? Without being invited, and fuzzy caterpillars swung down from the tree to see what was going on. I came in the other day with a big fuzzy caterpillar on me. No, I didn't kill it. I opened the door and put him outside. Because he'll be a pretty butterfly or moth. Let's see what was going on. 3 white-headed children peeped over the fence, and an objectionable dog barked at them from the other side of the river with all his might and main. "There's salt here if you prefer it," said Laurie, as he handed Joe a saucer of berries. "Thank you, I prefer spiders," she replied, fishing up 2 unwary little ones who had gone to a creamy death. "How dare you remind me of that horrid dinner party, when yours is so nice in every way," added Joe, as they both laughed and ate out of one plate, the china having run short. "I had an uncommonly good time that day and haven't got over it yet. This is no credit to me, you know. I don't do anything. It's you and Meg and Brooke who make it go, and I'm no end obliged to you." "What shall we do when we can't eat any more?" asked Laurie, feeling that his trump card had been played when lunch was over. "Have games till it's cooler. I brought authors, and I dare say Miss Kate knows something new and nice. Go and ask her. She's company, and you ought to stay with her more." "Aren't you company too? I thought she'd suit Brooke, but he keeps talking to Meg, and Kate just stares at them through that ridiculous glass of hers. I'm going, so you needn't try to preach propriety, for you can't do it, Joe." Miss Kate did know several new games, and as the girls would not, and the boys could not, eat any more, they all adjourned to the drawing room to play rigmarole. One person begins a story, any nonsense you like, and tells as long as they please, only taking care to stop short at some exciting point, when the next takes it up and does the same. We used to do that in class too. I don't know if we even had a name for it, but it was fun. It teaches the kids to listen, too. And me. It's very funny when well done, and makes a perfect jumble of tragical, comical stuff to laugh over. "Please start it, Mr. Brooke," said Kate, with a commanding gesture which surprised Meg, who treated the tutor with as much respect as any other gentleman. Lying on the grass at the feet of the 2 young ladies, Mr. Brooke obediently began the story, with the handsome brown eyes steadily fixed upon the sunshiny river. "Once upon a time, a knight went out into the world to seek his fortune, for he had nothing but his sword and his shield. He traveled a long while, nearly 28 years, and had a hard time of it, till he came to the palace of a good old king, who had offered a reward to anyone who would tame and train a fine but unbroken colt, of which he was very fond. The knight agreed to try, and got on slowly but surely, for the colt was a gallant fellow, and soon learned to love his new master, though he was freakish and wild. Every day when he gave his lessons to this pet of the king's, the knight rode him through the city, and as he rode, he looked everywhere for a certain beautiful face, which he had seen many times in his dreams, but never found. One day as he went prancing down a quiet street, he saw at the window of a ruinous castle the lovely face. He was delighted, inquired who lived in this old castle, and was told that several captive princesses were kept there by a spell, and spun all day to lay up money to buy their liberty. The knight wished intensely that he could free them, but he was poor, and could only go by each day watching for the sweet face, and longing to see it out in the sunshine. At last he resolved to get into the castle and ask how he could help. He went and knocked. The great door flew open, and he beheld a ravishingly lovely lady, who exclaimed with a cry of rapture, "At last," continued Kate, who had read French novels and admired the style. "'Tis she!" cried Count Gustave, and fell at her feet in an ecstasy of joy. "Oh, rise," she said, extending a hand of marble fairness. So her skin was very fair. "Never till you tell me how I may rescue you," swore the knight, still kneeling. "Alas, my cruel fate condemns me to remain here till my tyrant is destroyed. Where is the villain?" "In the mauve salon. Go, Braveheart, and save me from despair. I obey in return, victorious or dead." With these thrilling words, he rushed away, and flinging open the door of the mauve salon, was about to enter when he received, and it goes to somebody else, I think, a stunning blow from the big Greek lexicon, which an old fellow in a black gown fired at him, said Ned. Instantly Sir What's-his-name recovered himself, pitched the tyrant out of the window, and turned to join the Lady Victorious, but with a bump on his brow. Found the door locked, tore up the curtains, made a rope ladder, got halfway down when the ladder broke, and he went head first into the moat, 60 feet below. Could swim like a duck, paddled round the castle till he came to a little door guarded by two stout fellows. Knocked their heads together till they cracked like a couple of nuts. Then by a trifling exertion of his prodigious strength, he smashed in the door, went up a pair of stone steps covered with dust a foot thick, toads as big as your fist, and spiders that would frighten you into hysterics, Miss March. At the top of these steps he came plump upon a sight that took his breath away and chilled his blood. And the next storyteller, a tall figure all in white with a veil over its face and a lamp in its wasted hand, went on Meg. It beckoned, gliding noiselessly before him, down a corridor as dark and cold as any tomb. Shadowy effigies in armor stood on either side. A dead silence reigned. The lamp burned blue, and the ghostly figure ever and anon turned its face toward him, showing the glitter of awful eyes through its white veil. They reached a curtained door, behind which sounded lovely music. He sprang forward to enter, but the spectre plucked him back and waved threateningly before him. And now Joe's turn. "Snuff box," said Joe. Sepulchral. That's a good Edgar Allan word, and I probably slayed that. Tone which convulsed the audience. "Thank ye," said the knight politely, as he took a pinch and sneezed 7 times so violently that his head fell off. "Ha ha!" laughed the ghost, and having peeped through the keyhole at the princesses spinning away for dear life, the evil spirit picked up her victim and put him in a large tin box, where there were 11 other knights packed together without their heads, like sardines, who all rose and began to dance a hornpipe, cut in Fred as Joe paused for breath. And as they danced, the rubbishy old castle turned to a man-of-war in full sail. Up with the jib, reef the topsail, helm hard a lee, and man the guns, all sailor talk, roared the captain as a Portuguese pirate hove in sight, and a flag black as ink flying from her foremast. Go in and win, my hearties, says the captain, and a tremendous fight begun. Of course, the British beat, they always do. And having taken the pirate captain prisoner, sailed slap over the schooner, whose decks were piled with dead, and whose lee scuppers ran blood, for the order had been cutlasses and die hard. Boatswain's mate, take a bite of the flying jib sheet and start this villain. If he don't confess, his sin's double quick, said the British captain. The Portuguese held his tongue like a brick and walked the plank, while the jolly tars cheered like mad. But the sly dog dived, came up under the man-of-war, scuttled her, and down she went with all sail set to the bottom of the sea, where, oh gracious, what shall I say? Cried Sally as Fred ended his rigmarole, in which he had jumbled together pell-mell nautical phrases and facts, one out of one of his favorite books. Well, they went to the bottom, and a nice mermaid welcomed them, but was much grieved on finding the box of headless knights, and kindly pickled them in brine, just salty water, hoping to discover the mystery about them. For being a woman, she was curious. By and by, a diver came down, and the mermaid said, I'll give you this box of pearls if you can take it up. For she wanted to restore the poor things to life and couldn't raise the heavy load herself. So the diver hoisted it up and was much disappointed on opening it to find no pearls. He left it in a great lonely field, where it was found by a little goose girl who kept 100 fat geese in the field, sent Amy when Sally's invention gave out. The little girl was sorry for them and asked an old woman what she should do to help them. Your geese will tell you. They know everything, said the old woman. So she asked what she should use for new heads, since the old ones were lost, and all the geese opened their 100 mouths and screamed. Cabbages, continued Laurie promptly. Just the thing, said the girl, and ran to get 12 fine ones from her garden. She put them on the knights, revived at once, thanked her, and went on their way rejoicing, never knowing the difference, for there were so many other heads like them in the world. Cabbage-headed knights. Oh, my. So many others like them in the world that no one thought anything of it. The knight in whom I'm interested went back to find the pretty face and learned that the princesses had spun themselves free and all gone to be married but one. He was in a great state of mind at that, and mounting the colt, who stood by him through thick and thin, rushed to the castle to see which was left. Of course, it's going to be the one, won't it? Peeping over the hedge, he saw the queen of his affections picking flowers in her garden. Will you give me a rose, said he. You must come and get it. I can't come to you. It isn't proper, said she, as sweet as honey. He tried to climb over the hedge, but it seemed to grow higher and higher. Then he tried to push through, but it grew thicker and thicker. And he was in despair, so he patiently broke twig after twig till he had made a little hole, through which he peeped, saying imploringly, let me in, let me in. But the pretty princess did not seem to understand, for she picked her roses quietly and left him to fight his way in. Whether he did or not, Frank will tell you. I'm not playing, I never do, said Frank, dismayed at the sentimental predicament out of which he was to rescue the absurd couple. Beth had disappeared behind Joe, and Grace was asleep. So the poor knight is to be left sticking in the hedge, is he? Asked Mr. Brooks, still watching the river and playing with the wild rose in his buttonhole. I guess the princess gave him a posy and opened the gate after a while, said Laurie, smiling to himself as he threw acorns at his tutor. What a piece of nonsense we have made. With practice, we might do something quite clever. Do you know Truth? Asked Sally after they had laughed over their story. I hope so, said Meg soberly. The game, I mean. What is it? Said Fred. Why, you pile up your hands, choose a number, and draw out in turn, and the person who draws at the number has to answer truly any question put by the rest. It's great fun. Let's try it, said Joe, who liked new experiments. Miss Kate, Mr. Brooke, Meg, and Ned declined, but Fred, Sally, Joe, and Laurie piled and drew, and the lot fell to Laurie. Who are your heroes? Asked Joe. Grandfather and Napoleon. Which lady here do you think prettiest? Said Sally. Margaret. Which do you like best? From Fred. Joe, of course. What silly questions you ask. And Joe gave a disdainful shrug as the rest laughed at Laurie's matter-of-fact tone. Try again. Truth isn't a bad game, said Fred. It's a very good one for you, retorted Joe in a low voice. Her turn came next. What is your greatest fault? Asked Fred, by way of testing in her the virtue he lacked himself. A quick temper. What do you most wish for? Said Laurie. A pair of boot lacings, returned Joe, guessing and defeating his purpose. Not a true answer. You must say what you really do want most. Genius. Don't you wish you could give it to me, Laurie? And she slyly smiled in his disappointed face. What virtues do you most admire in a man? Asked Sally. Courage and honesty. Now my turn, said Fred as his hand came last. Let's give it to him, whispered Laurie to Joe, who nodded and asked at once. Didn't you cheat at croquet? Well, yes, a little. Good. Didn't you take your story out of the Sea Lion? Said Laurie. Rather. Don't you think the English nation perfect in every respect? Asked Sally. I should be ashamed of myself if I didn't. He's a true John Bull. Now, Miss Sally, you shall have a chance without waiting to draw. I'll harrow up your feelings first by asking if you don't think you are something of a flirt, said Laurie, and as Joe nodded to Fred as a sign that peace was declared. You impertinent boy, of course I'm not, exclaimed Sally with an air that proved the contrary. What do you hate most? Asked Fred. Spiders and rice pudding. What do you like best? Asked Joe. Dancing and French gloves. Well, I think Truth is a very silly play. Let's have a sensible game of authors to refresh our minds, proposed Joe. Ned, Frank, and the little girls joined in this. While it went on, the three elders sat apart talking. Miss Kate took out her sketch again, and Margaret watched her while Mr. Brooke lay on the grass with a book which he did not read. How beautifully you do it. I wish I could draw, said Meg, with mingled admiration and regret in her voice. Why don't you learn? Golly. Long chapter. I should think, almost 25 minutes. I should think you had taste and talent for it, replied Miss Kate graciously. I haven't time. Your mama prefers other accomplishments, I fancy. So did mine, but I proved to her that I had talent by taking a few lessons privately. And then she was quite willing I should go on. Can't you do the same with your governess? I have none. I forgot. Young ladies in America go to school more than with us. Very fine schools they are too, Papa says. You go to a private one, I suppose? I don't go at all. I'm a governess myself. Oh, indeed, said Miss Kate, but she might as well have said, dear me, how dreadful. For her tone implied it, and something in her face made Meg color and wish she had not been so frank. Mr. Brooke looked up and said quickly, young ladies in America love independence as much as their ancestors did, and are admired and respected for supporting themselves. Oh, yes, of course, it's very nice and proper in them to do so. We have many respectable and worthy young women who do the same and are employed by the nobility because, being the daughters of gentlemen, they are both well-bred and accomplished, you know, said Miss Kate, in a patronizing voice that hurt Meg's pride, and made her work seem not only more distasteful but degrading. Did the German songs suit Miss March? Inquired Mr. Brooke, breaking an awkward pause. Oh, yes, it was very sweet, and I'm much obliged to whoever translated it for me. And Meg's downcast face brightened as she spoke. Don't you read German? Asked Miss Kate with a look of surprise. Not very well. My father, who taught me, is away, and I don't get on very fast alone, for I've no one to correct my pronunciation. Try a little now. Here is Schiller's Mary Stuart and a tutor who loves to teach. And Mr. Brooke laid his book on her lap with an inviting smile. It's so hard, I'm afraid to try, said Meg, grateful but bashful in the presence of the accomplished young lady beside her. I'll read a bit to encourage you. And Miss Kate read one of the most beautiful passages in a perfectly correct but perfectly expressionless manner. Mr. Brooke made no comment as she returned the book to Meg, who said innocently, I thought it was poetry. Some of it is. Try this passage. There was a queer smile about Mr. Brooke's mouth as he opened at poor Mary's lament. Meg obediently followed the long grass blade which her new tutor used to point with, read slowly and timidly, unconsciously making poetry of the hard words by the soft intonation of her musical voice. Ooh, y'all, I got to stop. It's not too many more pages, but I got this little stopped up nose and cough and dry throat. So we'll just say this is chapter 12 continued. But I will be able to start chapter 13 next time. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that about 27 minutes probably. Maybe not quite that long because I rambled at first. Anyway, love to you all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. And hope you have a great night. And hope to see you tomorrow, Monday, where I'll be live at 5. And, of course, still reading. And I know several of you, I know Miss Dana from Wanderlust, and several of you said, oh boy, to Little House in the Big Wood. By the way, I did not put this in since it's a chapter book, and I know the fairy tales was kind of, but that had, you know, separate stories, so it was kind of a compilation. The playlist for this, I'm just putting under its own name, like the Little Women and so forth. So don't look for this in the junior. I forgot to tell the junior squad people that actually I didn't know I was going to do it till I was doing it a while ago. So this will have its own playlist. All right? See you all later. Love you. Mwah. Bye-bye.